Hi, we're glad to have you with us on Bring It Home, where we're going to take the concepts of Homeland Security and national security and help bring them home to you right where you live. Today, to do that, we're going to talk with Jim Olson, who's a professor at the George Bush School of Government and Public Service. Jim, thanks very much for being with us.
Nice to be here, Dave. Thank you.
Jim, explain to our audience, first of all, about your background. You spent a lifetime in the intelligence community before you came to teach with us. Tell us, what did you do?
Well, my wife Meredith and I were undercover. We did espionage and covert action overseas, worked in a lot of different countries, against a lot of different targets, primarily the Soviet KGB, but also other targets over the course of our career.
I can see the similarity between you and Sean Connery, Jim, but you're working for the CIA, is that?
Worked for the CIA and retired in 2000.
How in the world did you get into that business?
They found me. I was minding my own business, studying law at the University of Iowa, and I got a phone call out of the blue one day saying, "We think we might have a career opportunity that would be of interest to you," and that started the process.
Now today, you're doing that sort of recruiting as well as teaching our students here at the Bush School. Tell us about what you teach.
Well, I teach at the George Bush School of Government and Public Service, and we have a unique curriculum in national security studies, and we have several students who are interested in intelligence careers or other forms of national security. So I teach courses on intelligence, international crisis management, national security, with a very professional focus, preparing people specifically for careers in those fields.
Now, Jim, we're really talking to you today because of your book. Jim's the author of a new book, Fair Play, The Moral Dilemmas of Spying. And I guess to set the scene a little more, you had a career that took you all over the world, you served all over the world, and you had some pretty tough experiences yourself, didn't you?
Right. It was not an easy career. We're dealing with some pretty nasty people, not only KGB, but terrorists and narcotics traffickers. And we were nose to nose against those people in some back alleys.
From time to time, you found it, let's say, personally, physically challenging.
It was physically challenging. It's dangerous work, but it's very rewarding, too, because you're out there protecting the American people.
Now, how does that take you to this book that you've written, Fair Play? And tell us about the genesis of your desire to address the moral dilemma of spying.
Well, I wrote the book really for two reasons. First of all, I wanted to take the reader into the real world of spying because most people have a very distorted view of what it's really like out there. And so I take them into some real life situations. And then secondly, I point out the moral issues that are associated with the kinds of decisions that we have to make. And I don't think the American people really have come to grips yet with how difficult those moral decisions are.
Is there a fundamental theme when the reader picks it up? Is there a particular message you're trying to deliver, or is that the American people need to understand how tough this business really is?
I think the overriding theme is how far should we go in fighting terrorists specifically? Because they have no rules whatsoever, terrorists, and so it's very tempting to say we should fight back in the same way, but we do that at great peril because at some point we betray the values that we're fighting so hard to defend. So what I'm asking the reader is, in this specific situation, would you find this designated course of action by the CIA morally acceptable or morally unacceptable?
Now that's an interesting approach. It comes from your background teaching, I guess. You really do challenge the reader, don't you?
I do. I want them to understand that these are tough calls, and the readers of the book say that they really struggle with them. And people come down on different sides. These are not cut and dried issues. They take some real thought.
Jim, give us one or two examples, would you, that you use in the book that you draw on to really challenge a reader or to challenge our audience?
Yeah, well, we deal with the major issues of the day, things like assassination. You know, if we have Osama bin Laden in our sights, we have a CIA hit team out there, should we pull the trigger? Should we take him out? Assassination is something that is not technically legal in the United States, but how do you define being at war? How do you define someone like Osama bin Laden? Is he an enemy combatant, or is he someone who has special protections? I look at things like kidnapping. If we find a terrorist on the streets of some capital overseas, can we kidnap that person? Can we take that person out of action that way? I look at things like seduction, blackmail, and what kind of covers we can use. Should we use journalistic cover? Should we use missionary cover? Should we use humanitarian aid worker cover? Those are practical issues for us, but I think there's an overriding moral theme also. and what kind of country we want to be.
Jim, very challenging examples. You know, when I talk to people individually, and regardless of political persuasion, people are horrified at what happened at 9/11.
Yes.
And they say, we've got to keep that from happening again. We may not want to overreact, we got to keep that from happening again.
Right.
And so frequently people say to me, you know, whatever it takes, we need to do that, whatever it takes.
Sure.
But then when we take an individual example like that,
Right.
this is not, we're not going to take out a leader on the battlefield, we're going to catch him at home with his wife, and the question is, should we kill him at
Sure.
home with his wife?
Yeah.
The question of, do we get to this individual by baiting him
Right.
with homosexual advances?
Sure.
Do we buy off somebody close to a leader? All of a sudden, these individual questions are individual.
Yeah, it's a lot easier in the abstract. When you get down to an actual case study, and I have about 50 in the book that are drawn from my experiences, it gets tougher. You know, the one that comes up all the time is we capture a terrorist, and we have good reason to believe that that terrorist has information about other terrorists, their locations, their identities, future operations are being planned, funding mechanisms, information that we really need to have, but he's not talking. And so what do we do in the interrogation process? How far should we go? And we've talked about things like waterboarding, but there are several different stages of discomfort that can be introduced into the interrogation process. Now, the American people want us to push the envelope, or do they want us really to stay in a very benign type of interrogation?
Now, you really challenge us with two questions that I get out of the book, Jim, and it's a great book, by the way, Fair Play Again, The Moral Dilemmas of Spying. Two questions. One of them is, what is it that we should do with the individual? And the second one is, what kind of guidance do we give the people doing the interrogation? And that's the one that really struck me, because I hardly hear anybody talk about it.
Sure. And that is a big problem, and that's the case I make in Fair Play, that we as a government need to do a better job of defining the guidelines that our people operate under. Because the situation now, Dave, is that we've got CIA people overseas fighting terrorists, and they don't know where the line is. They don't know how far they can go, and it's quite possible that if they go too far, someone back in Washington after the fact will say, okay, you violated the law, we're going to prosecute you.
And if they don't go far enough, we can see people dead here at home.
Then they're not as effective as they could be and should be. So please, I'm pleading to our policymakers, both in the White House and in Congress, tell us what the rules are. How far should we go in fighting terrorism? We won't cross the line, but we need to know where the line is, because if you don't tell us, then we're going to hang too far back. And that's not the best way to fight terrorism either.
To sort of sum up here, what do you think your students get out of this? Is there a particular message that you deliver, or do you deliver to them the difficulty of dealing with ambiguity?
Yeah, I think that the students really appreciate the fact that they are citizens of a country where we take these moral issues seriously. You know, we may be the only country in the world that has this debate, because the other intelligence services, including in Western democracies, pretty much unleash their intelligence services if the lives of their citizens are at stake. And it's kind of, okay, you folks do it, but just don't tell us about it.
We don't want to know about it.
That's not our system, Dave. We are an open democratic society, and I don't think we should operate that way. And so I think our students are proud that they are part of a process and they're citizens of a country where we do debate these issues, and we are trying to find that balance between effective counterterrorism and still being a moral, upright society.
We've been talking with Jim Olson, who's the author of Fair Play, The Moral Dilemmas of Spying, and author of a faculty member at the George Bush School. Thank you very much, and I hope all of you found this interesting on Bring It Home, where we bring these issues home to you where you live.